Keith Urban's 9th studio album is here. Is it his most personal yet? Hey.
He walked onto the CMA stage as if returning to a home that no longer remembered his name. Keith Urban, the golden-haired outlaw of country music, the man whose guitar once softened the hardest hearts, whose voice held the trembling balance between tenderness and fire, finally stepped back into the spotlight after months of silence. But the world he returned to was not the world he had left behind. For decades, America embraced him as the dreamer who carved melodies out of scars, the four-time Grammy winner who turned heartbreak into anthems. He was the gentle storm, the quiet hero, the artist who made country music feel both intimate and endless. Yet on this night, when he appeared in the opening act performing Where the Blacktop Ends, the applause felt different. It wavered, unsure, heavy with questions no one dared speak aloud. People were not listening to the music, they were listening to the silence between the notes. The silence left behind after his sudden split from Nicole Kidman. The silence filled with rumors of another woman. The silence thickened by a controversial performance days earlier at Mar-a-Lago. The man standing under the lights carried more than a guitar. He carried a storm that followed him onto the stage and sat beside him like an uninvited guest. His return was supposed to be triumphant. Instead, it became a mirror reflecting everything he could not outrun. The heartbreak, the whispers, the choices that ignited a fire across social media. And beneath it all, a question that gripped millions. What truly happened to Keith Urban? And why did this comeback shake an entire room? Long before Keith Urban ever stepped under the shimmering lights of Nashville, he grew up in a place where dreams seemed too fragile to speak out loud. He was born in 1967 in Whangarei, a small New Zealand town far from any grand stage, far from the mythic world of American country music. His childhood home was modest, tucked between the quiet streets and the lingering scent of seawater. Inside that house, life was not cruel, but it was heavy, shaped by the burdens of a father who battled alcohol and a mother who worked endlessly to hold the family together. Keith was just a boy when he first learned that silence could be both a refuge and a wound. He often slipped into corners, listening to the distant arguments that cracked through the walls like thunder. To him, music was not hobby or entertainment. It was escape. It was the small flame he guarded in a world where storms felt constant. His father's drinking left shadows on the family's days, shadows that stretched across the dinner table, across the long nights, across the growing mind of a sensitive child. At school, Keith never quite fit. His accent, his appearance, his shyness, everything about him made him an easy target. He was mocked, pushed aside, sometimes shoved into lockers, or singled out for reasons he could never understand. But in every moment of humiliation, he clung to the one thing that made him feel seen: the guitar. His parents, despite their struggles, recognized the spark inside him. They found a used guitar with worn frets and scratches etched into its body, and they placed it in his hands as if offering a lifeline. From that moment, Keith would sit for hours, strumming until his fingers ached and blood dotted the strings. He played not to be great, but simply to breathe. The sound was raw, uneven, sometimes trembling, but to him it was freedom. By the age of 9, he was performing in small competitions around town, standing on makeshift stages in front of crowds who barely noticed a child with a guitar. Yet each time he stepped up, he felt something shift inside him. The fear that ruled him at school disappeared. The loneliness faded. For a moment, he was no longer the boy hiding from anger inside his home or from taunts inside hallways. He was someone else, someone alive. As he grew older, his obsession deepened. He didn't study the way other kids studied. He studied chords. He studied phrasing. He studied the peculiar magic in the voices of American country artists. Voices that felt like home, even though he had never set foot on their soil. He listened to Glenn Campbell, Don Williams, and Dolly Parton with a devotion others reserve for religion. Those songs whispered possibilities, whispering that a different life existed, even for someone like him. At 15, Keith made a decision that changed everything. He left school convinced that education could never offer him what music could. He took gigs at smoky bars where his youth shocked the regulars, his talent startled them, and his determination silenced their doubts. Some nights he played for $10, some nights for nothing. Some nights only his reward was escaping the chaos at home for a few precious hours. But every night, one truth hardened within him. He would never surrender this gift. Even when fear gnawed at him, even when he felt like a fragile thread pulled tight between expectation and despair, he refused to let go. The struggles of his childhood carved something permanent into him, a hunger, a desperation, a longing to belong somewhere he had never been. These wounds, carried from his earliest years, would shape the man he became, the tenderness in his voice, the fragility inside his confidence, the love he chased, the mistakes he later made. Everything began here, in that small New Zealand home, where a young boy held a guitar like it was the only light he had left. By the time Keith Urban turned 18, he was already standing at the edge of a choice that would shape the rest of his life. New Zealand had given him roots, but it had also given him ghosts. Australia offered a little more, bigger bars, wider crowds, and a music scene where his talent finally found air to breathe. So he moved, carrying nothing but a guitar case, a few shirts, and the fierce belief that if he didn't chase this dream now, it would die inside him. In Australia, he discovered the truth about ambition. It demands everything. Keith played anywhere he could, dusty pubs filled with cigarette smoke, wedding halls where no one listened, and roadside festivals where crowds drifted in and out like tides. He learned how to sing through exhaustion, how to smile through heartbreak, how to stand tall even when his pockets held barely enough to buy food. There were nights he slept on couches, nights he stayed awake rehearsing until dawn, nights when he questioned whether talent alone was ever enough. But something in him refused to break. Every setback sharpened him. Every rejection forged him. And slowly the whispers began. Musicians admired his precision. Producers noticed his tone, bright, clean, instantly recognizable. Crowds began to realize that beneath the quiet smile was a force rising from the ashes of a difficult childhood. Still, Keith knew that Australia, like New Zealand, was only a stepping stone. His heart was already somewhere else. Nashville, the sacred ground of country music. The place where legends were made, the place he had dreamed of since childhood. When he finally arrived, he discovered that dreams have a cost. Nashville did not open its arms for him. It barely glanced in his direction. He played tiny shows where only bar staff listened. He auditioned for labels that dismissed him before he finished a verse. Some nights he rehearsed in his car because he couldn't afford a studio. Other nights he slept there too, waking with cold breath fogging the windshield, wondering how long a dream could survive inside a body running out of strength. But every morning, he picked up the guitar again. He pushed harder. He wrote relentlessly. He studied the greats, not to imitate them, but to understand the machinery of emotion, how a simple melody could build a world, how a lyric could break open a heart. He watched performers who had nothing left to prove and learned that greatness was not loud, it was precise. The breakthrough came slowly, then all at once. His band gained traction, his writing matured, producers began calling him back instead of turning him away. And then came the moment that rewrote his destiny. His self-titled album in 1999, anchored by "But for the Grace of God," the song that lifted him from obscurity and carried him into the living rooms, radios, and hearts of millions. It was not just a hit, it was a declaration. Keith Urban had arrived. The song marked the beginning of a new era, one where the boy from a troubled New Zealand home stood shoulder to shoulder with America's greatest storytellers. Suddenly, the industry that once ignored him began to orbit around him. Fans embraced him not as an outsider, but as a voice they had been waiting for. And as Keith stepped deeper into the world he had fought so hard to enter, something inside him shifted. He had spent his life trying to escape loneliness, rejection, and fear. Now, for the first time, he felt like he belonged. Not completely, not perfectly, but enough to keep going, enough to ignite the version of himself the world would soon call a star. This was the rise that transformed him from a boy with a battered guitar into a man capable of reshaping the landscape of country music. And yet, it was only the beginning. Success did not arrive gently for Keith Urban. It roared in like a wildfire, bright and unstoppable, turning every room he walked into a stage and every melody he touched into a confession the world wanted to hear. By the early 2000s, he was no longer the boy fighting his way through smoky pubs or sleeping in his car outside Nashville studios. He had become one of the most luminous figures in modern country music, a man whose sound defined an era. His songs climbed the charts with a kind of quiet ferocity. Somebody Like You, You'll Think of Me, Days Go By. Each release seemed to carve his name deeper into the heart of America. Listeners felt something different in his voice, something raw and unpolished and real. He sang not as a star, but as a survivor telling the truth. And people listened. They heard their own heartbreaks in his ballads, their own longings in his lyrics, their own fragile hopes carried on the edge of his guitar strings. Then came the night he met Nicole Kidman, a moment the world romanticized. But for Keith, it was quieter, gentler, almost sacred. She was already an icon, the actress with the porcelain glow and the fire beneath her elegance. He was the country musician who had clawed his way up from obscurity. Together, they created an image that felt like a modern fairy tale. Red carpets, magazine covers, whispered admiration. Their marriage elevated him beyond country circles. Suddenly, he was not only a Nashville star, but a Hollywood figure, a man straddling two worlds with effortless grace. But Keith's rise was not defined by fame alone. It was marked by work, relentless, consuming, uncompromising. He poured himself into touring, sometimes performing more than 100 shows a year. Crowds filled arenas to watch him play guitar the way some people breathe, naturally, instinctively, as though the instrument were part of his body. Critics praised not only his skill, but his presence, calling him the poet of quiet heartbreak, the gentleman outlaw, the modern voice of country redemption. He wasn't just an artist, he was a symbol. As the accolades poured in, 4 Grammy Awards, countless CMA and ACM honors, multi-platinum albums, Keith seemed untouchable. He was invited to judge American Idol, rubbing shoulders with pop titans and broadcasting his artistry to millions more. His tours sold out across continents. His music videos were replayed on endless loops. His name became shorthand for excellence. But beneath the spotlight, something more delicate was happening. Keith Urban was becoming the kind of figure audiences project their fantasies onto. The star who must always shine, the husband who must always be perfect, the musician who must always give everything he has. People didn't just listen to him, they leaned on him. They needed him. And in the middle of that need, Keith forgot something. Even the brightest flame leaves shadows behind. The success that lifted him to unimaginable heights also strained the foundations of his personal life. Travel, pressure, expectations, they added weight to his shoulders, repeating echoes of the burdens he once carried as a boy. He struggled at times, even relapsed, yet each time he rose again, determined not to lose everything he had fought for so brutally. Still, to the public, these struggles were vague whispers on the wind. What they saw was the triumph, the golden-haired star commanding stages with the confidence of a man who had outrun every demon. What they didn't see was how thin that confidence sometimes felt, stretched across a life lived under constant scrutiny. By the mid-2010s, Keith Urban stood at the peak of his legend. Songs, awards, tours, everything he touched glowed. From a small town in New Zealand to the global heart of country music, his life had become a story that felt almost unreal. But fame, like fire, never stops asking for fuel. And even in the brightest years of his career, the seeds of a future unraveling were already quietly taking root beneath the gold and glitter. Because the higher he climbed, the further he had to fall. Fame had crowned Keith Urban with light, but shadows grew quietly behind him. They always had. The wounds of his childhood, the pressure of success, the relentless pace of touring, the expectation to be everything to everyone. They did not disappear because he smiled for cameras. They waited, and eventually, they returned. At the height of his career, Keith found himself slipping into old habits he thought he had buried. Alcohol had once been the chain he fought to break, but fame, with its seductive glow and relentless loneliness, made the chain glimmer again. The world saw the polished star walking red carpets beside Nicole Kidman. They did not see the man who sometimes staggered under the weight of his own expectations, fighting battles in hotel rooms far from home, trying to drown anxieties that refused to fade. Nicole stood by him through multiple relapses, always believing he could win the war against himself. For years, they were the couple who defied the odds. A Hollywood actress and a country musician, building a life that seemed, from the outside, enchanted. But Keith's inner storms did not quiet. The past never truly releases those it wounds early. As the pressures increased, the cracks in their marriage deepened. Touring schedules strained their time. The absence carved emotional distance. And then came the whispers, the kind that cling to public figures long before they reach the headlines. Rumors about guitarist Maggie Baugh surfaced, with a velocity that left no room for breath. To Keith, it was noise. To the public, it was confirmation of something broken. To Nicole, it was the signal of a fracture that could no longer be repaired. In September, the news broke. Keith Urban and Nicole Kidman had separated. Fans were stunned. The world that once applauded his fairy tale now dissected its ending with cold precision. Comments flooded the internet like a tide that refused to recede. Some angry, some heartbroken, some merely curious, but all loud. The love story that once defined them had become an autopsy for millions to witness. And then, before he had time to steady himself, before he had even taken a full breath as a newly single man, another storm hit. Just days before the CMA Awards, Keith made a sudden appearance at Mar-a-Lago. The public did not care that he was performing at a private dinner hosted by Australian billionaire Anthony Pratt. What they saw was a headline: Keith Urban plays at Donald Trump's estate. In a country divided by politics, this was enough to ignite chaos. People speculated about motives. They linked it to the divorce. They accused him of picking sides he never intended to choose. But what truly poured gasoline on the fire was the song he chose to perform, Pink Pony Club, a song about a queer woman finding acceptance at a gay bar, a song celebrating identity, belonging, and breaking free. and he performed it in front of one of the most politically conservative crowds in America. To some, it was brilliance. To others, hypocrisy. To many more, it was provocation. One person wrote that wealthy Republicans listening to a song about queer go-go dancers was the greatest irony of the year. Another insisted Keith was low-key trolling the MAGA crowd. Someone else said, cold and final, grounds for irreconcilable differences. Good move, Nicole. The backlash burned hotter than anything he had faced before. So when Keith walked onto the CMA stage, his first public musical appearance since the split, he was carrying more than a guitar. He was carrying the accumulated weight of a fractured marriage, a political controversy he never intended to spark, and a public eager to condemn before understanding. He didn't hear his voice. They heard the headlines. He didn't see the musician who once healed them. They saw the man defined by rumors they barely understood. His return was not a celebration. It was a tribunal. And under the bright lights, Keith Urban stood alone, surrounded by a noise louder than any applause. There is a moment in every artist's life when the applause fades, the cameras are lowered, and the truth, the real truth, stands unprotected. For Keith Urban, that moment came long before the CMA comeback. It came in the quiet spaces between the noise, in the places where the world could not follow him. What most people forget is that Keith has always sung about longing, not passion, not triumph, longing, a word carved by loneliness and carried by those who spend their lives searching for a home they've never truly found. His story was shaped by a childhood where safety was unpredictable, where love felt like something you had to earn, and where belonging was a dream rather than a promise. These patterns do not disappear with fame. They evolve. They deepen. Behind the polished interviews and the world tours, Keith had been wrestling with the same question for years. Where do I actually belong? In Australia? New Zealand? Nashville? Hollywood? On stage? Off stage? With crowds? With silence? With the woman he loved? Or with the person he feared he was becoming? This was the truth he never said aloud. Not even when the rumors grew louder. Not even when the public demanded explanations. Not even when the marriage that once felt like a sanctuary began to fracture under the weight of secrets that were never truly secrets. When he performed Pink Pony Club at Mar-a-Lago, many believed he was making a statement, political, rebellious, provocative. But the truth behind that choice was simpler, quieter, more human. Keith had spoken about that song long before controversy twisted its meaning. He said he understood the ache in it, the yearning to find a place where you finally feel accepted, where the world stops judging you long enough for you to breathe. He wasn't thinking about politics. He wasn't thinking about perception. He was thinking about belonging, his belonging. And perhaps that is why the performance ignited such fury. People saw offense where he felt connection. They saw strategy where he felt vulnerability. They saw defiance where he felt truth. Because when an artist sings from a wound the world does not understand, the world often mistakes it for rebellion. Another truth buried under the headlines was this. Keith Urban did not want the comeback to be a spectacle. He wanted it to be a reset. After the divorce, he was searching for footing in a life that suddenly felt unfamiliar. After years of being part of a celebrated couple, he was alone again. Not lonely, alone. There is a difference, though the world rarely recognizes it. In the weeks leading up to the CMA performance, insiders described him as introspective, not broken, but thoughtful, not defeated, but cautious. He wasn't trying to reclaim glory, he was trying to reclaim himself. When he walked on stage, he hoped the music would carry him the way it always had, but instead, it was drowned beneath narratives he no longer controlled. What few people saw was the quiet apology threaded through his voice. Not to Nicole, not to fans, but to himself. The boy who dreamed beneath the weight of shouts at home. The teenager who played until his fingers bled. The young man who believed music would one day save him. Keith understood now that sometimes the world loves the artist so loudly, it forgets the person beneath it. And sometimes the artist forgets him too. In rare interviews, when asked what music meant to him, he said something that now feels like the map to his entire life. It's where I go when nothing else makes sense. The hidden truth was that Keith returned to the CMA stage not out of confidence, but out of necessity. Music was his refuge long before it was his career. It was the one place where he could exist without justifying himself. But on that night, even the Refuge trembled. The public saw a man embroiled in controversy. The industry saw a star enduring a difficult season. But those who truly listened, those who understood the weight of a melody, heard something entirely different. They heard a man reaching for a place he had not yet found, a place he was still searching for. The hidden truth was simple and devastating. Keith Urban did not return to claim a crown. He returned because music was the last part of his life that still felt like home. In the end, Keith Urban's story is not the story of a fallen star. It is the story of a man who has walked through storms his entire life and still found the courage to step back into the light. The CMA comeback did not unfold the way he imagined. It was not triumphant. It did not silence the noise or heal the wounds that trailed him. But there was something quietly heroic in the way he stood there, guitar in hand, heart exposed, facing a world that seemed ready to judge before it listened. For 3 decades, Keith gave everything he had to music, the tenderness in his voice, the truth in his lyrics, the pieces of himself he never showed anywhere else. Fame crowned him, love steadied him, and heartbreak reshaped him. And now, in this new chapter, he stands stripped of illusion but not of spirit. If his journey teaches anything, it is that even legends bleed, even icons falter, even the strongest hearts can lose their way before finding it again. But a man who has survived his past can survive anything. So if his story reached you, if it stirred something quiet and human inside you, let it be known. Share it, honor it, because Keith Urban is not finished. The music is still his refuge. And somewhere ahead, beyond the noise and the rumors, a new beginning is waiting for him. Steady, unwavering, and his at last.